welcome to CDR Policy Scoop. Usually it's me and Sebastian discussing CDR policy developments, and sometimes we have great guests. This time we are spicing things up with a completely new format. This is special edition showdown, biochar versus direct air capture. We have more than 1,000 attendees signed up for this event, so it's going to be big. We are making CDR history right here. We know this event is being live streamed in some offices, so yes, this is very sad. Representing biochar carbon removal is Sebastian Manhart, Senior Policy Advisor at Carbonfuture, and representing direct air capture is Martin Freimüller, CEO of Octavia Carbon. And I am Tamme, Managing Director of Climate Principles, moderating this debate. I will start with two disclaimers to put this general context out there. First, in climate change mitigation, the primary focus in this decade has to be on delivering reductions next to starting to scale removals. And second, anyone seriously working on CDR knows very well it's not only about these two technologies or one or the other technology, it's all about portfolio approach. This is the way to go. We need to support the full ecosystem of various CDR methods because that's the only way we actually have a chance of achieving net zero targets. So this is the context where we're having this debate. But there are moments where one versus another actually does come up. Think of a buyer that wants to choose between one or the other project to support. And that's the moment where drilling into one versus another actually is very much relevant. Plus, we're hoping it actually helps also with some capacity building around CDR methods. My job here today is to keep this debate focused, on topic, on time. That's me. Your job, the audience, is to ask questions, use reactions and emojis on LinkedIn, add comments, and also to vote at the final poll because we will have a winner. And of course, the job for Martin and Sebastian is to be the best possible advocates for their respective CDR technology. We'll have 3-minute opening statements. Then there's going to be moderated questions by me. Then we'll have Q&A based on your questions from the audience. Then both debaters will have 1-minute closing statements, and we'll follow with a live poll where you, the audience, will decide who's the winner. The first question now would be, of course, who goes first? And in this case, I have a question for you, Sebastian and Martin, and who gets your answer closest will be the first one to go. So the question is, what is the current price difference between direct air capture and biochar on the CDR FYI price index as of today in US dollars? Keep your hands up, no typing. What's the number in US dollars, the difference?
400.
And Sebastian?
So this is not the 224 average, but it's something else.
It's a price index published on the site.
Okay, I'm going to go for the 2024 average, which was $140.
So you mean that now you have to calculate, but I asked for a difference between one and the other.
I know, it was 160 and 310 because they used that weird Holocene deal, which is $100 a ton. But okay. Yeah.
So wait.
So I guess Martin starts.
Okay. So the difference is 270. It's okay. 430 versus 160. So it's Martin that starts?
Fantastic.
Okay. I was a bit lost there. Martin, 3 minutes is starting to run now.
So thank you, and good day everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to have this great debate today. Let me start by saying that I love biochar and the people working on it, and I just worry that it's limited. DAC to me is simply more scalable, and so CDR buyers should have at least as much DAC in their carbon credit portfolio as biochar. And specifically, I want to focus on 3 main arguments for DAC today. Number 1, DAC's cost curve is steeply negative, biochar's isn't. Number 2, historically, biomass-based climate solutions like bioenergy and biofuels haven't scaled like engineered ones. And number 3, DAC is safe and reliable at gigaton scale, Biochar might not be. So let me focus on the first of these arguments. DAC's cost curve is steeply negative, Biochar's isn't. So DAC's technological readiness level today is where modern biochar paradises were in the 1980s. DAC is not expensive, it is early stage, and like all tech, it needs to come down the cost curve. That said, DAC's costs are falling really quickly, and there's many ways for it to be much cheaper than biochar can ever hope to be, because it will always be constrained by biomass feedstocks. Biochar, that is. At Octavia, the last of 4 DAC units that we've built in our field pilot cost about half as much as the first one we built, and that's in the space of about 6 months. For biochar, today's prices are pretty much the best we can ever hope for. And once you move past the obvious feedstocks, like say nutshells or sawmill residues, biochar's costs will rise, not fall. Reason number 2, historically, biomass-based climate solutions haven't scaled like engineered ones. So 10 years ago, biodiesel was about half the cost of EVs per mile, and 20 years ago, bioenergy was about half the cost of solar. Now, today, the engineered solutions are dramatically ahead. I don't see any inherent reason why the trend should be different in carbon removal. Experts used to say that EVs will never have the cost curves of solar, and yet today's $10,000 EVs can sometimes match the performance of the $80,000 EVs of 10 years ago. And then finally, number 3, DAC is safe and reliable at a gigaton scale. Biochar might not be. So DAC is safe, reliable, and insurable at scale. It's energy intensive, yes, but in places with ultra abundant renewable energy, like Kenya, that doesn't have to be an issue. Biochar, meanwhile, can be good carbon removal, and I will go as far as saying that I think most biochar today is good carbon removal, but a lot depends on the feedstock sourcing, the production process, and the application of that biochar. My stepdad is a farmer, and I can tell you his environmental audits are basically a joke, and like most farmers, he's deeply conservative and skeptical about climate change, so integrity there could be an issue. So to be clear, I'm not saying that we should stop doing biochar, but that carbon removal buyers should allocate more of their portfolio towards DAC this decade, because optimizing for what is cheap today but expensive tomorrow is a ruinously false economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Great start. Let's move on to Sebastian for his opening remarks.
Despite neglect in policy, media, and investment, biochar has proven itself to be the most shovel-ready, durable carbon removal technology available. It is the best shot we have to deliver megatons of durable removal this decade, and that has to be our shared goal today. While I firmly believe DAC will play a role in reaching net zero, we must be clear, now is not the time to prioritize DAC over biochar. Why? DAC is simply not ready to deliver, whereas biochar has everything it takes to scale today. 86% of all durable CDR delivered in 2024 was biochar. In fact, 81% of all durable CDR delivered in history was biochar. In comparison, DAC delivered less than 0.4%. There are 74 companies all around the world removing carbon through biochar today, compared to only 4 DAC companies, all based in North America. And the average cost of biochar is also just $150 to $200 a ton, whereas it is more than 3 times that for DAC. And all of this while DAC receives 7 times the private investment of biochar and billions in government subsidies. But let me tell you a bit more about what an incredible circular solution biochar is. Indigenous people in the Amazon were actually producing biochar to improve their soils thousands of years ago. In modern times, we have been producing biochar for decades, not because of carbon removal, but because of its incredible properties. Among many benefits, this black gold increases crop yields by an average of 10% and can be as high as 50% depending on soils and crops. Improves water retention by up to 25%, invaluable given the increased prevalence of droughts and wildfires like the devastating ones we recently saw in California. In short, biochar turns forest, municipal, agricultural waste, even cow shit, into a highly valuable product. And not just that, it powers its own process while also producing biofuels as well as renewable heat and electricity, displacing fossil fuels in the process. The beauty of biochar is that it solves many of humanity's problems all at once. So you might say, why support biochar if it is already doing so well? Think of it this way. Today, biochar is already smoothly driving in 3rd gear, looking back at DAC in the rear mirror, just getting out of the parking spot. With additional support, we can shift to 5th, even 6th gear. This means megatons of carbon removed this decade. Ladies and gentlemen, biochar is already winning the race. It's time we stop betting on potential and start backing results.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sebastian. You were very much on time. You made all your points with less than 3 minutes. Okay, picking up some of the themes, we heard that, first of all, DAC is getting cheaper, has a negative cost curve, is scalable to the gigatons, and doesn't have any sustainable biomass sourcing issues, whereas biochar is happening today, it's cheaper, and it has an abundance of co-benefits. So which one should we be supporting in this decade? And just telling to the audience that the statement or the debate motion that you will be voting on afterwards will be we should support DAC more than biochar this decade. And that's the statement that you'll be voting on in the end, and that's the focus, what you should have when you listen to the debate today. Okay, I'll put one question towards you, Martin. So Sebastian is making it very clear that biochar is happening and DAC really is not really happening, and we should be supporting what is delivering real climate action. What's your take on this? And you'll have, both of you in this session now will have 1 minute to answer any of the questions. So 1 minute going now.
Thank you. My main argument here would be that hard as it is to face this reality as early stage DAC industry, megatons don't matter. The world emits something on the ballpark of 50 gigatons of CO2 per year. Whether we do like single megatons or like dozens of megatons per year doesn't matter. What matters is what we can do at the gigaton scale. And I think even the most bullish estimates of where biochar can go at most see a couple of gigatons for it in the future. And I think that is where the real limitations around sustainable biomass sourcing and all these other sort of issues come in, where I do think that biochar is much more limited than DAC, which also means that we should support DAC today to get to that gigaton scale. And again, it's also not surprising that biochar is ahead because, again, that's the history that we have from, say, bioenergy and biofuels. And if nature does some of the work for you, that's nice, but then also nature doesn't scale the way engineering does.
Okay, thanks for that. Sebastian, a big question around biomass sustainability and availability. It sounds like, yes, you can do biochar now, but at some point you're going to be hitting the wall. You can't really scale it to the levels needed. What do you say?
So I would say first on biomass availability, we've got 5 gigatons of waste every year just from agriculture, and that number is going up. The US government, California has 100 megatons, just California, of waste biomass. The US government actually estimates that we will triple its waste biomass to 1.2 gigatons. There's a lot of waste biomass. And on the point of sustainability, we know how to regulate that. One, all the standards for carbon removal, for biochar carbon removal, actually have a very big red line on deforestation and purpose-grown crops. And two, we have things like the RED III directive in Europe, for example, that again helps us really clearly demarcate what biomass can be used and which one can't. And the final thing I'll say here is the type of biomass, I hinted at this in the opening statement, that we can use for biochar is the kind of biomass we can't often use for anything else. We can even use sewage sludge from cities for it. So there is really a huge opportunity in terms of biomass.
Yeah, if I can respond to that directly, if that's okay, Evie. So I'm less convinced on this point around like there being super abundant waste biomass. So even, you can sort of look at this issue in BACS, for example, right? And even at today's tiny scale, the one big BACS plant that there is in Europe has already had major issues around like sourcing non-sustainable like biomass. At today's tiny scale, like the issue that I have with biochar in that regard is that scaling it to the gigaton scale will mean we scale this to millions of farmers, and doing like really close audits at that level, I just don't see how it's happening. And also like we've seen this sort of narrative around like close, like safeguards and so on in previous waves of sort of biotechnology, like biofuels, bioenergy, etc. As I mentioned before, they haven't worked. Bioenergy and biofuels have a horrible track record on their sustainable biomass sourcing, and so that is, I think, a reason for skepticism on that count, if that makes sense.
Can I reply?
Sure. Go ahead.
Now that you got going. So first, I wanted to say one thing. The IPCC estimates that biochar can achieve around 2.6 gigatons. So it's not the whole 10 gigatons. Nobody's claiming we are, but we can achieve a good chunk of it. I find it's not a fair comparison looking at BECCS and biofuels because they use very different biomass from what we can use for biochar. And you actually made one of the arguments I wanted to make for me, which is that biochar is very decentralized and modular. We can have it in all sorts of different places, around every farm, every town, every city, whereas BECCS are highly centralized endeavors, right? And when it comes to the quality and the audits, and I think your grandfather's experience you mentioned, I totally get that, but we are building tools for that. Using IoT, using digital monitoring, reporting and verification, Carbonfuture is actually really at the forefront of this. So we are finding ways to increase trust and transparency when it comes to the whole lifecycle tracking of biochar.
Okay, I have a policy-related question for you. If you look at the EU policy developments, it seems that today it's DACs and BECCS that gets more attention compared to biochar. So question to both of you, and I guess I'll start with Martin. So do you think this is a reasonable approach, and why is that?
So from my conversations with the European Commission on this is that they've been burnt many times before about using carbon credits as in the European ETS especially, and so they need carbon removal to be insurable. And again, that is much easier in sort of centralized sort of facilities that have a very clearly traceable stream of CO2 that gets mineralized and turned into rock underground and sort of clearly monitored plumes. Again, that is a reason why they would be much more shy about rolling this out to millions of farms, because again, doing quality monitoring of the feedstock sourcing, the exact production process, and the application of biochar, and all of these matter for its quality, is devilishly hard. And again, I think that is the main reason why the European Commission and others prioritize BECCS and biochar over BECCS and DACs today over biochar.
So I actually think this is a historical legacy. There's a huge path dependency of DACs and CCS. And in fact, without the infrastructure for CCS, there is no DACs. And the CCS Institute actually reckons that we need 1.3 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars of CCS infrastructure by 2050. And 200,000 kilometers of pipelines are needed for CCS. And again, Europe is betting on CCS. Europe already has legislation for CCS. And that's why, I guess, because of this path dependency, they're also embracing CCS-based carbon removals. But actually, if we look less at legacy and more at what's happening today, we actually see that the European Union is embracing biochar carbon removal. In fact, in the CSCF, we're seeing putting it on the same pedestal of permanent removals as BECCS and DACs. So for me, this is, again, more path dependency and historical legacy more than a real prioritization today.
So let's talk about additionality, and then I'll also now look into some of the audience questions that are coming in. And by the way, everyone, keep on reacting, keep on commenting, keep on sending your questions. This is great. How do these two technologies really compare when it comes to additionality? Because especially with biochar, this is a question that comes up a lot, and it comes up as a question mark, much less with direct air capture. So I'll start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, and I guess you mean carbon, not necessarily just financial additionality.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. To the additionality to be eligible for carbon, to issue carbon credits for a project.
Yeah. I mean, this question really comes from one of its strengths, right? It's a versatile technology with several revenue streams that actually makes it much more resilient than, for example, direct air capture. But it does raise questions, why do you need the carbon finance, but also shouldn't we just do BECCS or even bury it underground? And what I would stress here is that it's often misunderstood because in carbon removal world, we look at it purely from a carbon removal perspective. And there I would say the carbon efficiency, of course, if you just bury something underground will be higher than if you create biochar. But if you look at the displaced fossil fuels from the use of biofuels, from the use of district heating through the pyrolysis process, we actually get a much higher result than if we just buried it. So we need to get out of this tunnel vision of pure removals and look at removals and reductions, displaced fossil fuel use. And if you look at all of that, biochar carbon removal fares really, really well.
So maybe to add to that quickly, and I agree that co-benefits are clearly an advantage of biochar. I would say that on some level, their biochar tries to have its cake and eat it too, right? Where, again, on one hand, we say that the co-benefits are so amazing, there's double-digit percentage increases in yields, etc. And but that sort of also has an impact on additionality, right? Because if you don't think about additionality, everyone with a tree in their backyard can sort of come knocking and ask to be paid, basically. And the tricky thing there is that the co-benefits are definitely nice to have. I think it's fair to say that biochar has seen very little uptake in conventional agriculture, mostly because again the co-benefits aren't generally seen as large enough to justify the investment in biochar. And if carbon finance can make the difference, again, it's something that I'm less concerned about. But again, it does somewhat go back to the point that again DAC will always be the sort of gold standard of quality, because yes, the additionality is 100% there as well.
So interesting question coming up from the audience, and it's that DACs and BECs are capital and IP intensive, whereas biochar is controllable by single parties. I guess, Martin, to you, and then Sebastian, you can add if you have anything.
The idea being that it takes more stakeholders to make it happen, hence...
basically, it's capital intensive, it's IP intensive, it's much more complicated to build a project when it comes to DAC or BECs compared to biochar. I guess we can even think about, how long is the lead time before you actually generate any kind of removal units.
I mean, that tends to be a feature of heavily engineered system. It's a lot easier to generate ethanol from, say, for biofuels than it is to build an EV with a sort of highly competitive battery. But again, that complexity tends to get baked into supply chains over time, and costs of that complexity fall dramatically. So again, you can bet that today's EVs are a lot more complex than those of 10 years ago, but they're also much better. So I would say that complexity in IP is generally seen a good thing. It's also a reason why DAC tends to attract much more investment, because again, that IP is just much more protectable. So I do think that's generally speaking a strength that sort of gives us more sort of levers to sort of really control the full process from capture to storage, which is very much not the case with biochar.
Can I react?
Sure.
Because I'd like to highlight a couple of numbers again from the CCS Institute, but they say that, for example, to build 1 megaton of DAC, and this is really what we're thinking, megatons, not even gigatons at this point, right? You need 275,000 tons of concrete and 30,000 tons of steel. And a Stanford study pointed out that to get to a gigaton of DAC, you will need an additional 50 to 100,000 kilometers of pipelines. So I do think there's a lot of infrastructure involved, and that is heavy, right? We can't get around that. And without that infrastructure, that will realistically, again, only be built for CCS primarily. If that doesn't happen for CCS, it won't be built just for DAC. And then we have a huge issue. And even if we build it, it's so capital intensive.
Yeah, and quickly to react to that, I mean, I will say that the experts...
Martin, I had to stop you there because we are getting closer and closer to the end, and I have a very limited amount of questions I can ask. I want to quickly cover 2 topics. One, the energy demand, and hence also the price of DAC. So that goes for you, Martin, and then the second would be the durability of biochar. That goes to Sebastian. So the last 1 minute reactions from you. So Martin, you have mentioned that DAC has this negative cost curve, but at the same time, when we look at the projections, we don't see the prices coming down that far. So there's obviously a challenge around energy intensity. It would take an insane amount of energy to produce gigatons of DAC. What do you have to say on that?
So on energy, again, yes, it would take hundreds of gigawatts of energy to produce DAC at gigaton scale, but at the same time, that's something like half the solar that China installed last year, one country, 1 year, half the production of one renewable energy. And of course, we at Octavia believe that much of that energy can be supplied from heat, not even actually electricity, of which there's hundreds of gigawatts of geothermal heat readily available in the Rift Valley.
Okay, and thanks so much, Sebastian. It's very easy to calculate how much CO2 is removed by DAC. It seems much more complex when it comes to biochar. It's just, there's still some confusion around how durable it is. What is your line on this? So and then we move into the closing 1 minute statements.
A lot of the science around permanence is based on a paper by Wolf from 2020 that it's largely been discredited by now. Unfortunately, it's found its way into a lot of standards, into the IPCC and so on. But there have been a range of studies recently that showed that it was actually underestimating massively the permanence of biochar. Thankfully, we now have methods called inertinite testing or reflectance rate testing that allows us to calculate the exact percentage of the biochar, usually 95, 98, 99% plus for high quality biochars, that is so-called inertinite, permanent, thousands of years. So that's changed a lot actually, and we're seeing the European Union, for example, leading the way and already embracing that new standard, which shows that it's credible and trustworthy.
Great. So 1 minute closing statements. I'll start with you, Sebastian, because Martin went first in the beginning.
Okay. Biochar carbon removal is affordable, proven, and ready to scale right now. It has already delivered 500,000 tons of carbon removal, more than 250 times what DAC has done in the same period. DAC remains expensive and requires large public subsidies to be feasible. So let me ask you directly, what world do you want to live in? One where we prioritize a yet to be proven technology, using up precious renewable energy needed for fossil fuel displacement? Or one where we remove the same carbon, but do so by turning waste into black gold, while helping farmers, preventing wildfires, improving air quality, and ensuring food security? The time for that will come, but it is not today. Let's channel the spare capital we have into a solution we know to work, a technology that we know can remove megatons this decade. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is now, and it is black. It's biochar.
Thanks, Sebastian. Martin, quick final words.
Thank you. If we need DAC at scale, we need it now. And yes, thermodynamically, thinking that you can capture carbon from something as dilute as air is crazy. It's about as crazy as thinking you can generate electricity from something as dilute as sunlight, or thinking you can push an SUV around on batteries. But here's the thing, as engineering scales, the crazy becomes commonplace. DAC at scale, which will be our lowest cost, most reliable, and most durable option for removing CO2 from the atmosphere. So join us today in voting for a future of abundance. One in which we don't rely on today's technology to hit our climate targets in 2050. And if you're more convinced than you were when you joined this call that DAC is an essential climate solution, then please vote in support of this motion. And as a quick plug, if you're a policymaker or a buyer in the carbon removal space, DAC needs your support today, and I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, both of you. We are now moving to the final poll, live poll. Let's get it up. And let's get the link in the comments of the LinkedIn event, and let's get the QR codes in front of us also for those who are on their monitor and they can use their phone to scan the QR code. Okay.
Now we're in business.
We are in business. So there is a QR code in front of you. Start, and I'm going to start the timer. So we'll give 90 seconds to register these votes. And meanwhile, as this is one of the CDR Policy Scoops that we've been doing, those of you who joined this LinkedIn Live, we've been doing this already for several times, for more than 10 times actually, just in a slightly different format with Sebastian, sometimes with the guests. We have had events on a range of topics, and you can always also listen to them afterwards in whatever application you use to get your podcasts. So if you search on your favorite podcast app, CDR Policy Scoop, you'll find us. You'll find our discussions on whether, for example, international credits help or harm achieving EU's 2040 targets, whether the SBTi got their draft version 2 standard right, and what it means for removals, and actually how to impact the outcome of that when it comes to removals. Whether it makes sense to focus on CORSIA or ETS to actually clean up aviation. We looked into what the change in administration in the US meant for CDR, and had a great session with Noah Deich on that. We've looked deeply into how it looks like for CDR to be included in the EU ETS. And here, I think we've done now 90 seconds of voting, and we
leave a little bit more time, Eve, because there was something blocking the QR code, unfortunately.
I see.
So
okay.
let's give it another 30 seconds. There was like
we'll give it another 30 seconds. That is fine. So maybe going. So we have had actually several discussions on the specifically focused in the US as well. We have quite a strong pipeline of great topics coming up in upcoming conversations. So what you have to do is definitely follow our page on LinkedIn, subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app, like and comment wherever you can engage with our work, because that helps us to get in front of more people. And so I think the results look very, very clear. We have it in front of us that most people who voted, the larger amount, find that they're more convinced of biochar than before. And then a few less are more convinced of DAC than before, and then let's say less people are those who haven't changed their mind.
Either way, lots of minds were changed, so I think civil debate is the winner, and thank you very much, Sebastian, for a fantastic debate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martin, for bringing this to us and for being such a good sport. And I knew this was going to be fun. And clearly, this is a tight one, actually. The longer we wait, the more that number for DAC seems to go up. So all the Octavia team is rapidly logging in again.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks, Martin. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks both of you. And thanks for the idea, Martin. You made it all happen. So thanks to everyone, and also to everyone working in the background. Helen, thanks so much. And have a great evening.